Healthcare, let's listen in.
All of that agreement is reflected in the current draft. We're at a different stage. There's now a bill draft that is public, and so there has been a lot of public debate on Obamacare for the last 7 years, and there will continue to be debate. We can get this done. We can get to yes, but the key to getting it done, to getting to yes, is we need common sense reforms that lower the cost of premiums so that health insurance is more affordable for families who are struggling.
Senator Cruz, are you making yourself, people sometimes when we get to these big bills, they put themselves in play. It doesn't do this provision or whatever, and then, you can trade horses and maybe get those things, and it's good optics. I fought for this, look what I got. Is none of that going on here? These are just things that you oppose, or do you think that by saying no, that they will come to you and say, maybe we can help you on this issue, maybe help you on this issue, and maybe get you to yes?
I have been clear from day one that I want to get to yes. When I ran for Senate, I campaigned on repealing Obamacare. It was the central promise of the campaign. In my time in the Senate, nobody has fought harder against Obamacare than I have. This matters. We've got to do it, but we've also got to get it right. It's not enough just to pass a bill that has Obamacare repeal in the title. We've got to actually have legislation that fixes the underlying problem. Under Obamacare, the average family's premiums have risen over $5,000 a year. That is the fault of the federal government. It's the fault of the failed federal policy that is Obamacare. We need to fix that. And so throughout the conversations with the working group, with the majority leader, with the president, with the vice president, I've made very clear I want to get to yes. And the way to get to yes is fix the underlying problems, lower premiums, and I will happily be part of it. We can get there, and I think there are a lot of other senators who feel very much the same as I do.
What about resolving that in a conference committee, and you turn out to be the person that prevents it? You're the 49th or 48th vote, and they're just shy.
Well, I think we can get there, but this current draft doesn't do nearly enough. This current draft, my biggest concern is under this current draft, premiums would continue to rise. And if premiums continue to rise after we hold a press conference claiming to have repealed Obamacare, that's a disaster. It's a disaster politically. It's a disaster substantively. It would be a failure of the mandate we've been given by the voters.
Would you be willing to make changes on the Medicaid legislation as it currently stands? Because even if you guys turn to yes, there's still the potential that the moderates like Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins could be no's and thwart this.
Everyone expects this current draft for there to be significant changes to it. And indeed, the majority leader and the staff in rolling it out, they said this is a discussion draft, this is a first draft, there are going to be significant changes. Of course, we're going to have to continue having a negotiation. Everyone's going to have to give. That's the only way you can get at least 50 out of 52 Republicans. We have a very narrow majority. The only way you can get to yes is if everyone is willing to give some. And I think the keys to it are focusing on issues, on principles that bring us together. And two principles that bring us together that I think are the keys to getting agreement and getting the job accomplished are, number one, lowering premiums. If premiums go down, that's a win for everyone. It's a win for conservatives. It's a win for moderates. It's a win for the men and women we represent. But number two, another principle that unifies everyone is state flexibility. Letting states have far more flexibility. So, for example, with Medicaid, letting each individual state design creative and innovative new plans to care for the most vulnerable, letting a more moderate governor like a John Kasich in Ohio do what the state of Ohio wants, and letting a more conservative governor like a Greg Abbott in Texas do what the state of Texas does. The beauty of a principle like more state flexibility is that it unifies our conference. It gives a win for everyone. And if we come out of this with premiums going down, with consumers having more choices, more options, lower prices, and states having more flexibility for creative, innovative solutions to caring for the most vulnerable, that is a big win.
But on Medicaid, though, you'd be willing to make changes.
Why couldn't you give what you wanted?
Of course.
Ted Cruz, one of those who stands against this. So where are we? I'm Shepard Smith in New York, and this is Shepard Smith reporting. The Senate GOP health care bill includes some key compromises to try to bridge the gap between conservative and moderate Republicans. But after weeks of closed-door negotiations and nearly a decade of Republicans railing against Obamacare, the bill as it stands right now could be dead on arrival. You see, 4 Republican senators say they are not yet ready to vote for this measure. Who are they? Well, Rand Paul of Kentucky, Ted Cruz, from whom you just heard, of Texas, Mike Lee of Utah, and Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. Republicans can afford to lose only 2 votes and still pass this bill. This comes just hours after GOP senators released a draft version. It keeps the fundamental principles of Obamacare intact, but dismantles some of the health care law. Gone are the so-called employer mandate and the tax penalty on Americans who don't carry insurance. This Senate draft lifts Obamacare's taxes on wealthy Americans and medical companies. It also creates a new system of tax credits for lower-income Americans, similar to the health care bill that the House passed last month, the one President Trump called mean. In fact, the Senate bill is a lot like the House bill that Senator Rand Paul called Obamacare Light. Under Obamacare, the government issues tax credits based on income, but the Senate would have the government give tax credits based on income and age, while the House bill has tax credits based on age alone. This Senate legislation would keep Obamacare's protections for people with pre-existing conditions, unlike the House bill, which would allow states to opt out. This Senate bill proposal includes a longer phase-out of expansions to Medicaid, which provides medical coverage to millions and millions of Americans. The Senate bill phases out expansions from 2020 to 2024, while the House bill cut all additional federal funding for the program in 2020. But this Senate proposal still proposes deeper overall cuts to Medicaid than the House bill did, as part of that compromise on which I reported earlier. The White House today would not comment on whether President Trump agrees with these Medicaid cuts. The White House banned live coverage of the daily briefing. When Sarah Huckabee Sanders came into the room, cameras were turned off, and the audio was embargoed until after the gaggle was complete. Here's audio of what the Deputy Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders said about these proposed cuts.
I don't believe that the president has specifically weighed in that it's right to cut Medicaid. I know one of the big parts of discussion is giving states flexibility. And again, the president hasn't weighed in specifically on any specific measure in this bill. And as he said earlier today, this is a negotiation between the House and the Senate, and we're going to play a part in that.
Well, on the campaign trail, he did say no cuts to Medicaid. He said it repeatedly. This has cuts to Medicaid. President Trump also spoke about the bill without getting into specifics. Here's what he said earlier.
Obamacare is a disaster. It's dead, totally dead, and we're putting in a plan today that's going to be negotiated. We'd love to have some Democrat support, but their obstructionists they'll never support. We won't get one, no matter how good it is, but we will hopefully get something done, and it'll be something with heart.
They'll have to do it with Republicans. Meantime, Capitol Hill police today arrested disability rights advocates who had gathered outside the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's office. The Majority Leader on the Senate floor said the health care bill is a chance to fix America's broken health care system and end the status quo.
When legislation does come to the floor, it will present Senate Democrats with another opportunity to do what's right for the American people. They can choose to keep standing by as their failing law continues to collapse and hurt more Americans. But I hope they will join us instead to bring relief to the families who've struggled under Obamacare for far too long.
Democrats say they will not do that. They've been blasting this Senate health care plan. The Senate Minority Leader, the Democrat Chuck Schumer, today called the measure a wolf in sheep's clothing with sharper teeth.
The president said the Senate bill needed heart. The way this bill cuts health care is heartless. The president said the House bill was mean. The Senate bill may be meaner.
Again, the head Democrat. But the truth is, this battle has nothing to do with Democrats at all. They're out. That's it. This is Republican division in play. You see, under this bill, the roots of Obamacare are intact. For more conservative Republicans, including the 4 for whom there is a no vote, that's the rub. They want government out of health care. But if too many protections for the sick and the elderly, children and the poor are removed, they'll lose more moderate Republicans. Today's proposal is a discussion draft. It cuts capital gain taxes, mostly on the rich investors, by $1 trillion. And it will most likely never become law as written. We have Team Fox coverage ahead on the Senate GOP health care plan, starting with Mike Emanuel, who's live for us on Capitol Hill. Hello, Mike.
Well, hi, Shep. Yeah, it sounds like there may be some serious last-minute negotiations to try to get some of those 4 Republican senators to yes, to get to 50 votes to pass it. The names you just mentioned, Ted Cruz, Mike Lee, Ron Johnson, and Dr. Rand Paul, all came out about an hour ago saying they're against this bill as written, but are open to negotiation. They say they want to do more to repeal Obamacare and to lower the cost of health care. Here's a sample of some of the Republican differences.
We're open to negotiation, but we want the bill to look more like a repeal. We're afraid that when we read the bill, that it actually looks like a reiteration or a keeping of Obamacare. As we estimate the costs of the subsidies to buy insurance, we actually believe that they may exceed or at least equal the subsidies that are in Obamacare.
This shifts power, distributes power back to the states, allows them to design plans, options that give their people in their states that fit those populations better, give them more choices, create more competition to help drive down premiums. Majority Leader Mitch McConnell would like to hold a vote on this GOP health care plan sometime next week. We will see if these 4 senators coming out against it force a delay and perhaps bump it back to later in July. Shep?
What else are we hearing from Democrats who really aren't in play here at all?
Well, that's right. You're absolutely correct. But they are basically protesting and trying to fire up their base. They're complaining about the process, saying it's being rushed through. Some are complaining about the cuts in the growth of Medicaid spending. Bottom line, Democrats are saying that this would be disastrous for our health care system.
What is being talked about here is like having a hole in the roof of your house. Instead of patching it, they want to burn down the house. So what we are not willing to participate in is burning down the house.
Expect this to be the hot topic on the Senate side of the Capitol and really across Washington over the next week and perhaps much longer. Shep?
Mike Emanuel on the Hill, thanks. So what would the proposed changes in the Senate health care bill mean for you and your family? The Fox Business Network's Jerry Willis is here to break it down. Does anybody lose coverage?
Yeah. So
millions of people.
No, not millions of people, maybe 500,000 people. And let me tell you specifically who they are. So under ACA, Obamacare would allow people who make 400% of the poverty level to get those important subsidies to pay for coverage, right? Well, not this bill. It's 350%, up to 350%. So from 0 to 350% can get these subsidies. So that means there's about 450,000 people out there who will not have coverage over time. And you said this at the beginning of the show very eloquently, breaking out what's in the bill. The Medicaid expansion will get fewer and fewer and fewer federal dollars, right? By 2024, they will bring that down substantially. Currently, they pay 9 out of $10 comes from the federal government. That will go back, that will be erased, go back to the levels of old-fashioned Medicaid, which is based on the proportion of people you have who are low income in those states.
So people who are getting their insurance or getting their health care through Medicaid expansion, maybe not today, not tomorrow, but they will lose that coverage.
What is expected to happen is that when the federal government backs off that 9 out of $10, that the states won't be able to make that up and they will shut the systems down.
All right. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you, Jerry. Much more ahead on this later from Capitol Hill. Lots of reaction from lawmakers, including Senate Republicans, slamming the GOP plan. We'll keep an eye on Capitol Hill to see if any more lawmakers come to the cameras, and we'll bring it to you if they make news. Well, first, President Trump is apparently trying to put an end to a controversy that he himself started. Today, he admitted he never recorded conversations with James Comey before he fired him as FBI director. But the president did leave the door open on whether somebody else may have recorded his conversations with James Comey. What did we learn today? Well, we're live at the White House coming up on Fox News. After more than a month of refusing to say whether he secretly recorded conversations with the former FBI director James Comey, President Trump now tweets he did not. But he is not sure if somebody else did. President Trump tweeted a couple of hours ago, with all of the recently reported electronic surveillance, intercepts, unmasking, and illegal leaking of information, I have no idea whether there are tapes or recordings of my conversations with James Comey, but I did not make and do not have any such recordings. Of course, the president opened the door to questions when he tweeted this just days after firing Comey. James Comey better hope that there are no tapes of our conversations before he starts leaking to the press. Comey earlier this month told the Senate Intelligence Committee, Lordy, I hope they're tapes. because the former FBI director said they'd back his side of the story. Leland Vittert with this from the White House. What led the White House to say about the president's tweets?
Well, Shep, they were steadfast that the president was simply answering the question he promised to answer this week, even when pressed multiple times by reporters. Why would it take 41 days to answer seemingly a very simple question?
I don't know there was a game. Again, he's answered the question. He gave a timeline in the frame that which he would, and he did that.
Now, you will note that this is only an audio recording in a trend that TV journalists are finding increasingly disturbing. Shep, more often than not, the White House says we are not able to bring in cameras to the briefings, not able to broadcast them live. And as you reported, the only thing we are allowed to do is broadcast the audio after the briefing ends.
The president this morning made it seem as if he was doubting whether Russia meddled in our election.
A lot of questions about that, and typically the White House says the president's tweets speak for themselves. So this tweet this morning raised a lot of questions. Here it is. By the way, if Russia was working so hard on the 2016 election, it all took place during the Obama admin. Why didn't they stop them? Why did the Democratic National Committee turn down the DHS offer to protect against hacks long prior to election? It's all a big Dem hoax. And while that sounded perhaps like the president did not necessarily believe Russia was behind the hacking, the White House then clarified.
The hoax is about the fact that they're trying to delegitimize his win in the election process and less about the hack itself. I think he's said several times now that he believes that Russia was part of it, but he also, some of those same members have said that they don't think it influenced the election. And I think that's what a lot of this process is about. It's about trying to make excuses for why Democrats lost.
And as we heard at his big rally last night, Shep, the president is more than happy to tell anyone and everyone why he thinks the Democrats lost.
Leland Vittert at the White House. Thanks. Much more ahead on Republicans' health care bill in the Senate, or its draft proposal, and opposition within the GOP. We'll talk to a congressional reporter who spent the day speaking with lawmakers. She says there are serious questions about whether this proposal will ever become law. In fact, this will not become law if these 4 Republicans don't vote yes. It won't. They are requiring changes. The thing is, if they change to make Rand Paul and Ted Cruz happy with it, where are moderates left then? And who might be lost? How to make this bill become a law? That's coming up on Shepard Smith Reporting. 22 minutes past the hour now. More on the health care plan put forward by Senate Republicans. Eliza Collins, a congressional reporter for USA Today. In this morning's edition, 9 questions we have about the Senate health care bill. Eliza, good to see you.
Good to be here.
One of the questions, will it be as mean, as the president put it, as the House version? And there are many who say it actually is.
Senator Kennedy actually walked out of a meeting this morning, and he hadn't seen the actual draft bill, but he was asked, is it as mean? And he didn't say anything. But, that's a big question right now. It's definitely getting criticism. It is very close to the House bill. There's some money in certain areas that kind of are more generous, but it's pretty close to the House bill and definitely less moderate than some people thought it would be.
Yeah. On the matter of Medicaid, 40% of all kids, 39% of all children covered by Medicaid. It's one of the fundamental social safety nets in our nation, and it does take a hit. To what degree?
It does take a hit. This is one where it takes definitely less of a hit than the House. It is going away. Republicans want this Medicaid program to end. It expanded under Obamacare. They do not want that anymore. The House bill cuts off 2020. This would be a 3-year phase-out program. There would also be some money for opioid addiction, which senators who were concerned thought that was kind of going to be lost if Medicaid funding is cut. But again, it is going to go away. It's just a little bit slower.
We talk about the 4 senators who are Republicans who've already said that they're no votes as the bill is written. They're open to compromise. But there are 2 more, Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, who are really upset about Planned Parenthood and Medicaid. And they're not for sure yet, are they?
Right, and they're on the other end. So we saw those senators.
That's the
who were
more
talking-
moderate ones.
Exactly. The 4 senators who came out already, they're conservative. They think this is, as Rand Paul calls it, Obamacare light. They'd like it to be a full repeal. On the other end, you have someone like Senator Susan Collins, who's very moderate, Senator Murkowski, who is fairly moderate, and they both had concerns about Medicaid and also that Planned Parenthood defund that you mentioned. It is in the bill. It's not clear yet, though, if it'll pass with Senate rules. So it's sort of this in limbo, but Susan Collins came out already and said, she has definite concerns about that. It's absolutely not a necessary part of the bill, in her words.
In reading through here, there is what amounts to $1 trillion cut in capital gains taxes, mainly on rich investors, and it appears that that's being made up for how?
Not totally clear yet. There's different funding things moved around, but it's definitely, there's a lot in there still being picked through.
Yeah, there is, and there's a lot more to be heard on this, especially from Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, and we'll wait for that. I guess the rub is if you appease the more conservatives within the party, the sort of Tea Party wing, if you will, the Freedom Caucus, then you start to lose more moderates, and I wonder what the compromise is that might get them to 51 votes.
And I'm so glad you mentioned the Freedom Caucus, because that's actually the 30-something House members who are very conservative. They did this exact same thing when this bill was in the House. They said, no, we're not going to vote for it, and they pulled the bill to the right, and moderates ended up getting on board. And I think that's what people like Rand Paul and Ted Cruz and Mike Lee and Ron Johnson are hoping will happen, that there's more of them that they can say, and moderates will end up getting on board, even if they're not totally happy with the bill.
Soon enough. Eliza Collins from USA Today. Her article is online now and on the app. And we're waiting to hear much more from the rest of the Republicans on this matter. And when we do, we'll bring it to you. Right now, we're minutes away from a scheduled news conference in Detroit, where FBI officials are set to give an update on a stabbing, which they now say they are investigating as an act of terrorism against a police officer. Officials say a man yelled in Arabic and attacked a police officer after saying God is great in Arabic. What else we're learning about that suspect? Coming right up as we approach the bottom of the hour and the top of the news.
I'm Leah Gabriel with a Fox report and more of today's headlines. Iraqi officials say Islamic State terrorists blew up a historic mosque in Mosul. The landmark dates back hundreds of years. U.S.-backed Iraqi forces report they are closing in on Mosul's historic district, the terrorists' last stronghold in the city. 2 window washers fell from a scaffolding after it malfunctioned and collapsed in Philadelphia. That's what investigators told our local Fox station. The workers were strapped in, so they are okay. Crews lowered them to a nearby roof and took them to the hospital. And someone called England's version of 911 to report the Queen to the police. Cops say the caller accused Her Majesty of not wearing her seatbelt. The Queen traveled to Westminster yesterday with Prince Charles to mark the start of a new session of Parliament. In response, the royal family announced the Queen always takes steps to make sure that she is not breaking the law. We'll be right back.
Breaking news now on Fox News Channel. We're awaiting a news conference out of Michigan after a suspect stabbed a police officer in the neck at the airport in Flint, according to investigators. The FBI reports it's now investigating yesterday's attack as an act of terrorism. The news conference taking place at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Detroit, about 60 miles south of Flint. The feds say their suspect, Amor Fatoui, is a Canadian man of Tunisian descent. They say he shouted in Arabic and said something similar to, "You have killed people in Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and we are all going to die." Police say the officer, Lieutenant Jeff Neville, is now in satisfactory condition. He was initially critical. Garrett Tenney's in Flint for us. What else are you hearing about the officer's condition, Garrett?
Well, Shep, everyone we've talked to here at the airport has told us that Lieutenant Neville was the kind of guy that everyone likes, and he was always the first to help out. We talked to a friend of his shortly ago who said hours after surgery last night that Lieutenant Neville was already making jokes and talking with friends about how lucky he is to be alive, and he really is lucky. I want to show you. This is where the attack happened yesterday. FBI tells us that Amor Fatoui came out of this bathroom carrying a 12-inch hunting knife. It was here where he stabbed Lieutenant Neville in the neck, and within seconds, 3 to 4 officers, along with a maintenance worker, jumped in to help separate the two, and eventually Fatui was arrested. And that quick response is now being credited for the reason that Neville is still alive. Jep?
What more do we know about this suspect?
Well, we've learned from the FBI that he is not believed to be part of any type of larger terrorist cell. He's believed to be a lone wolf, and his motivation, that we're told at this point, they believe that he was carrying out this attack due to his hatred for the United States. We've also learned from court officials that Amour Fatui has lived in Montreal, Canada for the last 10 years. He's married, he has 3 children. He had been working on and off as a truck driver and most recently worked 2 weeks ago. Earlier, House Homeland Security Chairman Mike McCall told us that investigators are also working to find out what Fatui's plans were when he entered the country last Friday.
We know that he was probably self-radicalized, was doing this in retaliation for the killings in the Middle East, in his words. He traveled from Canada to New York, then to Michigan, attempted to purchase a firearm, and was denied because he's a foreign national.
Now, investigators are also getting help from the Canadian authorities who raided Fatui's apartment and his home in Montreal last evening. And we are also told that prosecutors have said they plan to notify the Tunisian government about the arrest, and they're hoping to learn more information from the Tunisians and help with the investigation there. Shep.
Garrett Tenney on scene for us at the airport. We're waiting for that news conference to begin down in Detroit at the U.S. Attorney's Office. I believe it's at the prosecutor's office there, and we'll take you there as soon as that news conference begins. First, more on our top story. And Senate Republicans releasing their plan to replace Obamacare, but at least four GOP senators say they are not yet ready to vote for that bill. That alone would be enough to sink the proposal. And on top of that, there are more Republicans who have said they need time to decide. One example is the Maine Senator Susan Collins, a Republican, one of the moderates. Her communications director says in a statement, Senator Collins will carefully review the text of the Senate health care bill this week and into the weekend. She has a number of concerns and will be particularly interested in examining the forthcoming CBO, or Congressional Budget Office analysis, on the impact on insurance coverage, the effect on insurance premiums, and the changes in the Medicaid program. Peter Ducey's on Capitol Hill for us. What are you hearing from the rest of the Republicans?
Shepard, we're hearing now some more details about what happened behind closed doors when GOP leaders made a presentation to the rest of their conference about this draft discussion plan for health care. And we're learning that the leaders didn't have a whole lot of details, but still they did not lose all Republican lawmakers who have said that they might be skeptical about the plan, including Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy.
The presentation, it lowers premiums. That's a major issue. I think it begins to address the Jimmy Kimmel test. A child who is terribly ill, or any loved one, would both have coverage, but also a way to keep the coverage affordable.
But if there's one thing that we have heard over and over and over again, just about every Republican that we ask, even though now it's been a couple hours, it's that they just haven't had enough time to read the plan from their party's leaders.
Well, I still look forward to reading the bill. I haven't been able to get back to the office to read it yet, but obviously it's a process where it deserves consideration and debate and not knee-jerk reaction. So there's a lot of opportunities to learn what's in the bill, and that's what we have to do.
Is a week enough time to have that debate?
And we didn't get an answer about the week part, but the reason that they're asking is a week enough time. That's how much longer the GOP leadership wants to wait before they bring this thing to the Senate floor, Shep.
And the word is they don't want to go home to their districts before they voted on this thing because they're expecting to get an earful. Which other senators should we be watching here?
There are 4 others that we're watching very closely, Shep, and have been for several days. They are Senator Shelley Moore Capito from West Virginia and Senator Rob Portman from Ohio. Both of them have been pushing for more money to combat the opioid epidemic in their states. And then you've got Senator Susan Collins from Maine and Senator Dean Heller from Nevada. Heller is up for re-election this cycle, just like Senator Ted Cruz, who announced his opposition to this plan as it's written right now a little while ago. Shep.
Peter Ducey up on the Hill for us. Thank you. An update now on President Trump admitting he did not make and does not have any recordings of his private conversations with James Comey, the now fired FBI director. But instead of putting the controversy that he created to rest, he also tweets that he has no idea whether other tapes or recordings exist. The president has disputed Director Comey's claim that the president asked Comey for a pledge of loyalty during a dinner meeting. When news of Comey's account broke, President Trump tweeted that Comey better hope that there are no tapes of our conversation, tapes in quotes, before he starts leaking to the press. Last month, the president fired James Comey, who was leading the agency's Russia investigation and the look into potential Trump team ties to Russia. After that controversial firing, the Deputy Attorney General appointed former FBI Director Robert Mueller as special counsel to lead the investigation into all things Russia and Trump. Our Times new cover story focuses on special counsel Robert Mueller and his Russia investigation, and we recommend that reading. Here it is, the lie detector test. Someone's not telling the truth. But first, there's breaking news, and we want to get to Detroit, where the U.S. Attorney's Office is now holding that news conference on what they're now calling a terrorism investigation and the stabbing of a police officer in Flint, Michigan. Let's listen.
As well as the special agent in charge, David Gelius of the FBI Detroit Division, which covers the state of Michigan. First, we'll hear from Mr. Lemish, then SAC Gelius, and after that, we will have approximately about a 10-minute question and answer session. We'll take questions from folks that are in the room here with us first, and then we'll go to the ones that have dialed in on the conference, so just need to be patient with us. And we'll start. Mr. Lemish.
Thank you very much, Tim. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to talk to you today about an incident that happened at the Flint Bishop International Airport yesterday, and a lieutenant with the Flint Bishop International Airport Police Authority by the name of Jeffrey Neville was stabbed in the neck by a man by the name of Amor Fatohi. Mr. Fatohi is a 47-year-old citizen of Canada who is originally from Tunisia. After the stabbing, which happened early yesterday morning, Lieutenant Neville was assisted by several citizens, by other police officers, by workers in the airport that came to his aid, and Lieutenant Neville himself fought back against his attacker. We are told that Lieutenant Neville is in stable condition and he is improving, and our thoughts are with him and his family. Yesterday at approximately 5 p.m., this office charged Mr. Fatohi with violating 18 United States Code Section 37A1, which is called committing violence at an international airport. That crime makes it illegal for any person to unlawfully and intentionally use a weapon to perform acts of violence against a person at an airport serving international civil aviation. The acts of violence must cause or be likely to cause serious bodily injury or death. This crime is punishable by up to 20 years in prison. However, if death results, the offense is punishable by up to life in prison or potentially the death penalty. On June 21st, yesterday evening, the defendant made his initial appearance before Magistrate Judge Stephanie Davis at the United States District Courthouse in Flint. The defendant was ordered temporarily detained without bond, and his next hearing will be on June 28, 2017 at 2:30 in the afternoon, at which time the court will decide whether to give him bond or not. The Federal Defender's Office is currently representing Mr. Fatohi. The investigation continues to determine the full extent of his planning and his actions and whether he committed other crimes, including a federal terrorism offense. The Canadian authorities have been assisting the United States in this investigation, and we want to extend our thanks to them for all of their cooperation. Yesterday, our Attorney General, Jeffrey Sessions, issued a statement about this case and about the priority that his administration and the President have for any crimes committed against a uniformed officer or any federal agent in this country. And I'd like to read that to you, if I may. I've just spoken with officials at the FBI about the attack on a police officer in Flint, Michigan, that is being investigated as an act of terrorism. President Trump has prioritized the safety of all law enforcement officers, and this Department of Justice is committed to that goal. I want to assure all our law enforcement across the nation, any attack on someone who serves and protects our citizens will be investigated and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I am proud of the swift response from the FBI and our federal prosecutors and their partnership with local police and the Canadian authorities. Our prayers are with the officer and his family for a full recovery. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Good afternoon. My name is Dave Gellius, the special agent in charge of the FBI in the state of Michigan. I appreciate you being out here again today. I just would qualify my brief update here today with the fact that this is still a pending investigation, so I'm not going to be able to get into a great deal of detail with respect to the investigation since the attack yesterday morning at about 9:45 a.m. at the Bishop International Airport in Flint. As you all know, I won't recount exactly, but as you all know, we know that subject Fatui traveled into the United States legally at Lake Champlain, New York on June 16th. Preliminarily, based on the information we have thus far, we show him in Michigan as early as June 18th. I can't say definitely he wasn't here sooner, but we show activity in Michigan on June 18th. As a result of the attack yesterday, we've now conducted over 20 interviews of witnesses, and we expect to do additional interviews as we continue to go through the information that we have obtained through a variety of investigative means. We've also executed several search warrants, and those search warrants could lead to other search warrants. And I won't get into the details. I'll get into one specific search we conducted was with respect to the subject's vehicle, which had been driven here from Canada, which we located in the parking lot at the airport, and we conducted a search of that vehicle. And I won't go into specifics of what we found in that vehicle, but certainly that helped us with some of the indications of how long he had been in Michigan or when he may have first entered into Michigan, and other information which we hope to further exploit. You may have heard that, and we certainly are working with our Canadian partners, and investigative efforts are going on in Canada, where he was a resident of the nation of Canada, and we are waiting for those investigative results from our Canadian partners. So we don't have much in the way of results from the Canadians yet. Following our investigative efforts through today, I'll repeat what I said yesterday, that we continue to have no information to suggest Fatui's attack on Lieutenant Neville was part of a wider plot, nor do we have any indication that he was aided in this incident or had associates associated to this incident. So that remains, nothing has changed since yesterday. At the end of this press conference, we do want to provide a photo of Fatui. The reason being, if he had been here as early as the 18th, and we don't know where else he had been once he crossed over into the United States, but if there are any individuals who encountered Fatui while he was in Michigan or anywhere on his route from New York to the state of Michigan, we'd like to get that photo out there. We would ask that individuals who have information relevant to Mr. Fatui call our office at 313-965.
Okay, there you go. He said that really nothing new there. Should there be any news to come out of the Q&A section of this, we'll let you know. Moments ago, I was about to introduce Time Magazine's Washington Bureau Chief Michael Scherer, who is live with us to discuss the Mueller investigation. The lie detector is the cover of Time today. What is your sense now for where this thing is?
Well, Robert Mueller has actually been pretty successful, we believe, in limiting leaks from his operation. And he's said through a spokesperson that anyone from his operation that leaks will be dealt with rather severely. What we do know is he has been hiring up lawyers with a lot of very interesting specialities, including white-collar prosecutors, people with expertise in money laundering, especially in Eastern European countries, which is interesting. There's someone on his team who's an expert in turning witnesses, and there's another person who's an expert in the constitutional questions of criminal law, which could come into play if Mueller decides at a future point to consider trying to indict a sitting president, which opens up a tangle of legal issues. We know from what he's been given, he basically gets to choose his own adventure here. He can go in pretty much whatever direction he wants. He can look at the counterintelligence issues here. He can look at obstruction of justice questions about the president, and he can look at the question of collusion and what involvement Americans may have had in the